All right, we've made it through Mexico, and this probably comes to some people's surprise and other people's delight. And we have been told by so many people, don't go to Mexico, it's too dangerous. And we've told by other people, I just got back from Mexico, it was amazing. So what do you do as a traveler? How do we know if we should or shouldn't go? Well, I think our first thing is always, we're gonna take the advice of the people who were actually there, first and foremost, because they have the latest intel, the latest information about what is going on there on the ground. And with a lot of research and thought, we were careful about it. We tried to do our due diligence, but we decided, yes, we want to go to Mexico. We want to check it out. We want to see the cool things that all of our friends had shared with us, and it was worth it. Do you think there was any more risk than a lot of the other places we've traveled?
I mean, risk is a relative thing, right? So we're rock climbers, we're kayakers. We accept a degree of risk in a lot of what we pursue for fun. So I think that traveling through Mexico, you have to be a lot more aware than you do whenever you're traveling in the States.
Same as rock climbing and kayaking, right? You've got to be aware.
Exactly. And I think that with that being said, I don't think that it was any more risky. I think it was just a different set of environmental factors that we had to take into consideration as we were traveling across the country. So we learned a lot, and but I think, more risky than our normal life, probably not.
Yeah. All right, so we reached out to you guys. We reached out on social media, we reached out on Patreon, and we asked you guys, what are some of your questions about traveling Mexico that you would like to know? And we got a wide range of questions. Some were kind of joking and some were very serious. And we received a couple that were very common questions that a lot of people asked us the same thing. We want to just jump into those and give you guys kind of our take on your questions from traveling all the way across Mexico. Now we entered in the north side of Baja, right there at Tecate, and we went all the way down to the tip of Baja. And we've done that 2 winters in a row now, so we've really explored Baja extensively. And then this year we jumped across from La Paz over to Mazatlan. And then from Mazatlan we were on mainland Mexico, and then we went on to explore central and southern Mexico all the way from Chiapas into the Yucatan and beyond. So we got a pretty good tour of South and Central Mexico and Baja. Now we still haven't done the northern parts, but we want to just give you guys our take on it from our personal experiences through the questions that you guys sent us. So we appreciate you guys sending us the questions. Let's dive into it.
So the number one question that we've gotten across the board is it safe? So what do you think about that? Is Mexico safe?
Yes, I think Mexico is safe. Now, safe is a relative word. I feel safe in a lot of places in the United States, and I feel unsafe in places in the United States too. So I think it's whatever your comfort zone is and where you come from and what you're used to is going to dictate how you feel. And a feeling isn't always a representation of reality. So you might feel safe, and there might be a guy right behind the tree ready to whack you on the head with a stick. But I did feel safe. I thought Mexico was safe. I thought all the fear that people had told us and put into our minds, none of those things happened. We didn't have any scary experiences directly with police. We didn't have them with military. We didn't even have them with a singular bad guy. We did what we wanted to do. We saw the beautiful parts of the country, and it felt great. We aren't going to bars in the middle of the night. We aren't going to strip clubs. We aren't going to places where people who might be wanting to do us harm or criminals might be hanging out. We're trying to avoid those places and eliminate our chances of running into those kind of people. So we tried to stay in the safe zones. We tried to stay places where tourists and other overland travelers would be, kayakers some of the time. We were hanging out with them.
And I think there were a couple of things that we did to amplify our safety, or at least our awareness of what was going on.
Yeah.
And so one of those things was we never drove at night. And it wasn't because necessarily that dangerous things happen at night, but the roads in Mexico are dangerous. They are filled with potholes and drop-offs and livestock and dogs and people. And so it's just a whole lot to take in, and it's just a good policy to not drive at night. So we definitely stuck by that safety rule. We also checked the U.S. State Department website for areas that the U.S. recommended do not travel. And we did have to traverse through some of those places, but when we did it in one push. We didn't stop for gas. We didn't stop to eat out. We didn't stop for any reason. We just stayed on the toll roads, and we traveled right through.
Yeah, the toll roads were great. Toll roads are a lot safer. They're a lot nicer. They're well cared for. They don't have all the challenges like you mentioned a minute ago. But, there's still the toll roads, and they have a lot of military presence, and you pay dearly for them. They are kind of expensive, but they do offer a level of safety.
Definitely. And then the other thing that we did is we used the iOverlander app a lot, and that gave us real firsthand experiences of people that had been there recently, talking about where they camped, where they got water, where they got groceries, all of these different things. And they would leave, firsthand accounts of their experience there. And so if there was a kind of sketchy trip report from an area, we didn't go there.
And you could also look at the dates when that stuff was posted, and that to me made me feel better when I saw that there'd been some people there recently, they had a good report, then we felt like it was probably a good spot. Or if there was something bad happened, they mark a lot of those. You'll see these red symbols with an exclamation point in it, and that's kind of like a warning symbol. And you do see them all over the map, but you can click on it, it might have been something that happened in 2016. And then you're like, oh yeah, nothing really has happened since then. And then other ones, maybe more people had commented on it and had newer dates, and then that gave you an idea for maybe what the likelihood of something being just a one-off or something that maybe happens more regularly. But these aren't always robberies and dramatic things. Sometimes there's a really bad pothole. Watch out for the pothole at kilometer marker.
Or a bridge
14,
is out or something like that. Yeah.
Exactly, it could be anything. So
we had a lot of strategies in place to ensure our safety or to amplify our safety as we traversed across the country. So I know that there are dangerous places there, but we didn't experience them firsthand.
All right, next question.
Okay. All right, let's see what else have we got. The second most common question is, did you have trouble with corrupt police?
So I thought maybe we're going to have a lot of problems with corrupt police. That's something you hear about a lot. That's something everybody says. Keep $100 in your shoe so you can pay a cop off so you can get off the hook. We experienced none of that. Every time we had an experience with the police, it was very positive. They were curious where we were coming from, what we were doing, but just like you would be if somebody drove into your hometown in a funny vehicle that looked like they were on a massive trip, you'd probably be like, hey, where are you guys from? What are you doing? What's going on? And it was very innocent and just curious. We never once got extorted. And a lot of other overland travelers said that we probably would, that this would probably happen, but it never once happened to us. The closest thing we had to an extortion was we were at a military checkpoint down in the Yucatan, and we pulled in, and they want to ask where you came from, where you're going. Sometimes they do want to look in your vehicle to see if you have anything in there that's contraband. But this particular young soldier just asked those normal questions, and then he said, would you happen to have a collectible dollar bill? And I said, collectible dollar bill? Like, what is that?
We kind of laughed.
We kind of laughed, and we actually kind of laughed in his face, and I felt like, oh, maybe I shouldn't have done that. And then he got this kind of sheepish grin, and we said, no, we don't have any dollar bills. We only have pesos and a credit card. And he's like, okay. And then he's like, have a great day. And that's all it was. It was really simple. And that was the closest thing that we had to being extorted. And I even feel silly telling you guys about this because it was so far from the horror stories that we'd heard. It's pretty benign and kind of boring.
Kind of funny.
Kind of funny.
So I think it was interesting when we went through the police checkpoints. There are a lot of police checkpoints. We would go through multiple checks a day. And some of them, the officers would just be looking at their phones. Some of them would stop us and ask us a couple of questions. And I think only 2 of them actually asked us to look inside the van. I think overall we were glad to see the police. We were glad they were checking on things. It made us feel safer. And we had an overall great experience with the police.
Yeah, no problems with the police in Mexico. They felt great. And if you guys haven't seen our In Danger in Mexico video, check it out, because that was an interesting night where we thought maybe we were going to get robbed. We were going to at least get extorted. Something bad was going to happen. And it turned out that we made some friends that happened to be 4 police officers.
I think that was absolutely the scariest experience that we had in Mexico, that particular instance. And it was just the police looking out for us. So, I think that's a pretty good reflection of our overall experience across the country.
Yeah. All right, so the next question here is, what about the cartel? Did you have any run-ins, or did you ever feel in threat?
I can probably answer this one because I can honestly say I'm not confident that I ever actually saw anyone that is in the cartel. If they were there, they blended in with everyone else, and we didn't have any experiences with them at all.
Yeah.
We didn't have any run-ins with the cartel that we know of. There were a few really nice vehicles in some really impoverished places, but we were in a really nice vehicle in an impoverished place. So who knows?
Who knows? Yeah, I mean, they don't wear a cartel uniform or anything. It's hard to tell. It's kind of like criminals in the U.S., you know. If they're good ones, usually they're hard to spot.
Exactly. So another question that we commonly get is, were there any sketchy roadblocks?
Yeah, and when I think of these are outside of the military and police checkpoints. I think there's a difference between a checkpoint and a roadblock. And we experienced some what we call rope blocks, which would be people who had a rope tied to maybe a tree or something on the other side of the road, and you'd come around a corner and they'd be holding this rope back. Maybe there'd even be someone standing in the street and they would want you to stop. Well, we stopped at a few of them, and usually what we found is somebody wanting to sell us something. They'd come out with bananas, or they'd come out with papayas, or whatever it might be. And that was great, but I also felt like it was a little invasive way to sell something, and we didn't really want to necessarily stop in a weird place that we weren't sure what was going on. So after a little while, we started coming into these roadblocks with locals in front of us, and the locals would just keep going, and the guys would drop the rope right before they got to it, and they would drive on through. Well, we thought, if this is what the locals do, we want to blend in and do what the locals do. So the first one we came to by ourselves, they pulled up the rope, and I just kept going, and I made it very clear that I was not slowing down, I was not stopping, and I just kept going, and sure enough, when I was about 20 feet to the rope, they let go of it, it dropped to the ground, we went right over it, and through we went. It was really no big deal. They weren't throwing rocks at us, they weren't screaming at us, it was not confrontational or violent in any way. They weren't looking to do us damage, they just want us to stop and buy bananas from them, for a really good price usually. Like, you get a whole bunch of bananas for like 50 cents.
And if we needed bananas, we did stop.
We did, yeah.
But, sometimes we would come across these like 15 or 20 in a row, and it was just cumbersome to travel.
We seem to see these mostly in Chiapas and down south.
So our patron, Joe Cocaron, I hope I said your name right, asked us, what sources do you use to make sure you're on the safest route, specifically to avoid gang-related incidents? Or is it a big concern? News reports suggest the whole place is covered by gangs. What's your take? And I think this was our biggest question going into this adventure is, like, what are we getting ourselves into? Are we setting ourselves up for a bad situation? And so we talked about it a little bit earlier of the tools that we use. We used the State Department website. We used iOverlander. But honestly, our best intel came from talking to people that were there. And so anytime that we could talk to a local, that was our best source of information to keep us safe.
Also, other travelers. We ran into many Europeans, South Americans coming north, and those guys would be a great source of information.
So this was what I thought was really interesting as well. There seems to be travel corridors where overlanders tend to congregate. And so whenever you come into a place like that, you'll see other people that have been traveling across Mexico for weeks or months, and it's a great opportunity to just meet people from all around the world and to share information and stories and dinner and the whole thing. It's a wonderful experience.
In Veracruz, we didn't see any tourists or anybody other than maybe Mexican tourists. And that was kind of neat too. You know, I wouldn't avoid places in Mexico just because other overlanders aren't going there, because we thought Veracruz was a genuine experience of what a normal Mexican village in those areas is like, and that was really refreshing to just walk around, and we were the only gringos that we saw in the whole week we were there. So it was interesting.
And I think that's important to note as well. It's something that we talk about a lot between the two of us, is when you're traveling at a slow pace like this in a vehicle and staying in a place for a long time outside of the resorts, it's a completely different experience than when you fly in and you stay in a resort that caters to tourists and things like that. You get a little taste of an area when you do that.
Maybe.
But when you're traveling this way and you're talking to people and interacting with people that live there, it is a wonderfully rich, extraordinary experience. And it's been our favorite part of this whole trip.
Yeah. In fact, the resorty areas that we visited were probably our least favorite areas.
That's true.
And we kind of wanted to go there because that's what everybody in the U.S. talks about is, you know, Cancun and all these places. And then when we got there, we're like, this just doesn't feel like the rest of Mexico that we've experienced in the more remote areas. So
it didn't feel like our favorite places in Mexico.
Yeah, it didn't. It just felt like almost we were back in the States, like in Southern California or somewhere. So
yeah.
Which, nothing against Southern California. I love Southern California.
We love Southern California.
But that's not what I go to Mexico to look for. I can go to Southern California and find that.
That's true. So.
All right, here's another question from our patron, Jeffrey Klish. Thank you so much for your support, by the way. General planning question. Do you typically have all your spots planned out before you go, or is it something you plan on spot to spot? He's just trying to gauge other folks' planning routines.
Yeah. So this, I call it an expedition, is a 2-year expedition. And there's just no way that you can plan in detail everything that you need to plan for 2 years. It's just too overwhelming. And so we planned the big bits, like which months we're going to be in a specific country or an area. And then as we talk to people, I just keep a notes on my phone of everything that everyone tells us along the way. So when we meet somebody new and they're like, oh, you're gonna love Costa Rica, here's what you need to do, this, and this. I just write it all down in that notes section. And then as we get closer to that place, then I look at all those notes and we kind of make a route through where we want to go and the places that we actually want to go to, and we research those. As far as day-to-day things, we usually spend about an hour a day looking for the next day's campsite. So we have a big picture plan, but the details we do day to day.
And sometimes we run into another traveler who tells us of a place we have no idea about beforehand, and we're like, we're going there.
That's true.
So it's pretty fluid, but we do plan it.
Yeah. All right. So the next question is, what route did you take?
What route did we take? So this is interesting. So the general answer to that is we're on the Pan American Highway. The Pan American Highway is a route that goes north to south, south to north, and it's different highway numbers in different countries. Like in Central America, a lot of the highways are highway number 1. And that's just a general term. I don't know of any Pan American traveler who just goes down the Pan American Highway. As far as thinking of it in terms of the U.S., it's like staying on I-40, and you're like, I'm going on I-40, and you're going across the country. Well, no, you're gonna go down I-40, and you're gonna detour to go to this national park, and then you're gonna detour to go to another national park. It's kind of the same thing as far as the Pan American Highway, except sometimes we're deviating like halfway across the continent to go somewhere. And everybody takes a little different route. So we are varying quite a bit. And from other people who might have done the Pan American trip, we're probably going to have a very different path. Although there are going to be places that we probably all go to. Machu Picchu, places like that, right? Mm-hmm. So that's a hard question to answer. But the route that we took is we just wanted to go to the places that interested us. And we have visited a lot of cities. Cities aren't our thing. We really want to go explore places like this and be up in the mountains and the beaches and explore the more wild places. But there are some really awesome cultural cities that we wanted to go to as well. So we let destinations dictate our path, And yes, we are on the Pan American Highway. In fact, where we're sitting right now, it is just right down the hill here is the official Pan Am. But we're going to be on it for a little bit, and then as soon as there's something that entices us off of it, we're off the Pan Am and on to somewhere else. So generally speaking, we're going southbound.
What a great trip. I'm ready to go back.
It was cool. It was good.
All right, let's see. What else we got? So we should address that. Should you take the ferry from Baja to mainland?
Do you like ferries?
I love ferries. Like, that could be my favorite way to travel. And the ferry from Baja to mainland was fantastic. We took the truckers ferry, which caters to people that are transporting goods and semi-trucks. And so, again, we were with local people, not tourists. And it was just a really neat, authentic experience to ride on a working boat for about, 16 hours, I think.
Yeah, there's nothing plush about it. It is, they have a restaurant on board. If you call it a restaurant, maybe it's more like a dining hall. And they basically just serve you 2 meals. You get a dinner and a breakfast. But it was interesting. We're sitting on there and everyone around us speaking Spanish, except for a few other overland travelers that were on there with us. And they're all watching the soccer game on the TV and cheering loudly. And it was a really neat glimpse into that side of Mexico.
Yeah. I would definitely recommend that. We love Baja personally, and so it's always a treat to be able to explore Baja, and then to get to ride a ferry on top of that. I mean, you really can't lose in that scenario.
It was awesome. Wow, we just had a really intense rainstorm. Seems good for now for a little bit. The sun is out, so let's see if we can finish your questions before the next rain comes. So the water in Mexico is handled a little differently. The average citizen, their house has running water, but it usually comes from a tank that is on the roof. And that tank, it gives them the ability to have water pressure because the city water pressure isn't great enough to give you like shower head pressure. So you'll see on many of the houses as you drive through Mexico, these big plastic barrels, more like a tank that are on top of the roof. And this is where they get their water pressure from. Now, being that it's sitting there in a tank, it is closed off and all, but it is not drinking water. It's not purified water. It's totally fine to wash dishes with. It's totally fine to shower with, but you don't want to be drinking it. So the average Mexican goes to their nearest purificada, which is a water purifying retail store. They basically sell bottled water. It comes in these big plastic bottles that are called garrafones. And they're a lot like we think of in an office building where they might have a water dispensing machine. It's got the big tank that you flip upside down and then you can get a cup of water. It's a lot like that, but that's how everyone does their drinking water. Now, for us in the van, we have 2 options for filling up our water tank in the van. One is, if we're lucky, we can back straight up to one of these purificada stores and get very close to it, and we can take our same hose that we would use in the US to fill up our tank from a tap, and we can tap into the pure water that comes out of the store, and then they just fill it up as normal. That's super easy. The other way that we found, some places they don't have just the lay of the land. You can't get the van close enough to the store, so we end up buying garrafones. And we find if we are totally empty, it takes us 4 garrafones to fill our 24-gallon tank. So sometimes it's 3, sometimes it's 4. Usually we buy 3, we fill it up, and if it hasn't completely filled by the end of the 3rd one, then we'll buy 1 more. And usually it does it in half of that one. So those are the 2 ways that we've gotten water in Mexico. And do you remember, what does it cost to do a complete fill up?
So it varies depending on location, but between $5 and $7 to fill our entire 24-gallon tank.
So water in Mexico is just different. It's just a little different as far as the process. Once you figure that out, it's really no big deal, and these stores are readily available, and it's easy to find. The other thing that I think is nice is the Mexican drinking water is probably better than the tap water that we get in the US, because it is coming straight from these purification stores, straight out of a filter. This hasn't been running through miles of pipe or anything. So we feel like our drinking water was really good in Mexico. Now, speaking as far as filtration, we are really glad that we have our Guzzle H2O water purifier on board. And we've found that we've enjoyed that in other places where we've had to get different water other than at the purificadas. So that's really been in the U.S. and in other countries in Central America. We've been really glad, because sometimes, you get safe drinking water, but it has a funny smell to it, or you taste it and it has a funny taste. The Guzzle H2O system just removes all of that and makes it really nice water to drink.
And even just our water sitting in our tank that's been at 100 degrees for a week, it's just it's a safer system to have it run through the guzzle before we drink it. Okay, the next question is, what did we do for car insurance? And we went through Baja Bound, which is an organization that offers all kinds of information for travelers in Baja and beyond. And they have recommendations for vehicle insurance. We bought Chubb insurance, CHUBB, and we bought a 6-month policy because it was a fraction of the cost of a 3-month policy. But you do have to get insurance, because U.S. insurance doesn't cover you, at least most policies, more than 5 or 10 miles south of the border. And it is required by law to at least have liability insurance. And of course, it's recommended to have more comprehensive coverage. And I've gone into a ton of detail about car insurance on our Patreon field guide to Baja. So if you want to learn all the ins and outs of insurance, you can check out our Patreon field guide for more information. Okay, next question. Is fuel readily available?
Fuel is totally available in Mexico, just like it is in the United States. Now, there's a few little spots in Baja where you might go a little further than you're accustomed to, but I don't think any modern vehicle will have a problem reaching that range. It might be 100, 120 miles. So, you can find gaps like that in the U.S. if you really are looking in the desert Southwest. But fuel quality for us, we haven't had any problems. We haven't noticed any difference in the way our vehicle runs. Everything has been just like normal, really. It's something most people fear about who haven't been there. And then everybody who goes is like, yeah, what are you worried about? Because it's really easy to find fuel.
And to piggyback on that, tell us about DEF, because a lot of people have asked us about diesel exhaust fluid.
DEF is readily available throughout all of Mexico. When we went into Baja for our first time, we were a little nervous as far as if we would be able to find it. I actually brought 2 bricks of DEF as backup, just in case I had a hard time finding it. Once I got down there, I made it kind of a game to every time we stopped in a grocery store, if there was an auto parts store nearby, I would go in and just see if they had it, even if I didn't need it. And I found it probably 8 times out of 10 going in different auto parts stores I could find DEF. Then when we got to mainland Mexico, I thought, ooh, this is probably going to be a little trickier. Well, no, it's exactly the same. You'll see some of the U.S. chain auto parts stores in mainland Mexico too, and they all had DEF as well. We have found DEF all the way down to right within 10 miles of the Belize border. There was DEF there. So you have no worries about driving your modern diesel vehicle through Mexico for a quality of diesel standpoint or finding DEF. It is just not a problem.
Okay, next question. Can I travel solo, or do I need travel partners?
What do you think?
Well, we love traveling with George. We have hit the traveling companion jackpot when it comes to George.
Yeah.
And we wouldn't have it any other way. I think that we would absolutely be comfortable doing it by ourselves, but we certainly wouldn't have as much fun without George.
I think solo travel is a lot of fun, but I think, the first time you go somewhere, and especially if it's a place that you're a little on high alert, you're a little nervous about, then having companions is great. And even having multiple vehicles is really nice, traveling in a convoy. But once you've been there and, you kind of feel like you understand what it's like and you've lessened some of that anxiety, then I think traveling solo is a lot of fun, and it's a very different experience, and can be very rewarding. We have a blast together, but I have a lot of fun too on my own. So
yeah, me too.
Either way, I think it's up to you, whatever your comfort level is and whatever you're looking to accomplish from your travels.
We did meet a handful of Americans traveling by themselves across Mexico that were having a great experience.
I would say if you don't have anyone to travel with, don't let that stop you from having these amazing experiences. Just go.
Just go. And to piggyback on top of that is, should I worry about driving a conspicuous, expensive vehicle? And this was something that we worried about a lot. In fact, even so much as the color of our vehicle. We're like, oh my gosh, could we drive a red van through Mexico, or would that be way too conspicuous? And, you know, looking back, we drove into town with 2 really tricked out Winnebago Revels. And we were definitely a spectacle as we drove into town. But at the same time, going into small villages, everyone knows everyone, and regardless of what vehicle we would have been in, they would have known that we weren't from there. And so I think that it's not really a big deal at all. Either way, you're going to be a visitor and a guest, and it's just important to be a good guest, make a great impression so that future travelers are welcomed and embraced by the same community that you're traveling through.
Also, there's a lot of Sprinter vans going all throughout Mexico that are not only American, but they're Mexican Sprinter vans. You know, it's not like these vehicles don't exist there naturally. And, you know, you think somehow that this is a fancy thing. Well, your average Mexican person in a small village has probably seen hundreds, if not thousands, of Sprinter vans before. So unless they just have a keen interest in Sprinter vans, they don't even give you a second look. It's just like another vehicle coming down the road. Same with the military and the police. They didn't really care what we were driving. They just, you know, either they were into cars, into 4x4s, into Sprinter vans, and they might have given it a second look just because they were interested in that. But it wasn't because we're in this Winnebago Revel that we got any sort of unwanted or bad attention. It was never a problem.
Now you put kayaks on the roof, everybody wants to know what's up there.
Yeah.
All right. Where did you eat, and did you get sick?
Eating. Gosh, that was probably one of my favorite parts of Mexico, was the restaurants and the food, right?
Definitely.
There, in Baja, you have the amazing tacos that, you know, we just couldn't get enough of. And we kind of thought we would have those all the way to the border of Belize. And they definitely, the food changes regionally. As you move across the country, it's a little different. Even what they call a taco turns out to be a little different as far as ingredients and the way it's presented, and even
the types of tortillas that they're on, everything.
As you go further south, you don't see any more flour tortillas. It's all corn.
The best places were where a little grandma was cooking on an open flame on the side of the road with these little plastic chairs set out, and the food was amazing. And we tend to eat out once a day, and then we cook the rest of the meals. And that way we get to explore the local food and get a feel for what people eat there. And then, of course, we get to cook our familiar favorites at home as well. And we made it all the way across Mexico without any foodborne illness. That was something that we were worried about going in, and we definitely ate at some very primitive roadside stands, and we had nothing but great, wonderful food. Okay, I've got one more question for you.
Okay.
Last one. Do you need to know Spanish before you take a trip to Mexico?
Well, Spanish never hurts. I mean, so I would say no, you don't have to know Spanish to travel through Mexico, but you will have a much richer experience if you can talk to locals and understand more what's going on around you if you have some Spanish. Or I feel like that's probably the one thing on this trip that I feel like I've really missed out is all the neat people we meet. I could only talk to them just a little bit and gain a little bit of what they're trying to tell me. And I think if I could fluently understand them, I would know so much more coming out of this trip. So I don't think you have to have Spanish. You're still going to have a great time. You're still going to learn things that you didn't know before. But the more Spanish you have, the better it's going to be.
And I think that everyone that we encountered was genuinely helpful and kind and trying to communicate with us. They were very understanding that we didn't speak Spanish, and worked really hard to communicate with us. So it's not necessary, but yeah, we really missed a layer of richness on our trip, not speaking fluently.
You will pick up a lot along the way, And what you don't, we've found Google Translate to be a very good tool for the times when you just kind of got to figure it out. But also be warned, Google Translate is pretty good, but it's not exactly the same as how someone would talk or understand something. So it's a rough approximation of some of the conversations that we've had, but it certainly has been helpful.
It'll get you by.
So there it is, the guide to mainland Mexico. So that's it for now. I guess the only thing to say is, I hope I see you somewhere over the horizon. Take care, guys.